Good evening, everyone. Time for episode 29 of The Drums of Doom, starting on page 363 with the chapter titled Salvation. Dartin has just been resurrected in the halls of Andamar Tabaroon and has returned to the party. Okay. We'll start back on 362 a little bit. You have aged, Tao said. Do you have any memory of where you have been? I remember some of it, Dartin said, a haunted look in his eyes, mostly pain in the fires of hell. I was a prisoner of the abyss for 10 years or more before my father freed me. Your father was also in hell? I know now that my father was not just a Northman. He was Odin himself. That must explain your ability to wield the runes, Tao said, and your name. So we travel with the son of a god, Karina said in feigned disbelief. This quest just keeps getting better and better. What else do you remember? I was resurrected by the Lord of the Dead, Dartin said, a lich named Andamar Tabaroon, whose wife, Marie Elizabeth, I rescued from hell. She was the most beautiful woman who ever lived. What did she look like? Tarek asked. She was gray elven, with hair both long and dark and eyes like the midnight sky. Her skin was all silk and ivory. So you are smitten, Leander said. No man looking upon her could have felt otherwise, Dartin said knowingly. It was Andamar's love for her that drove him to madness when she was kidnapped by the Archduke of Hell. He struggled to save her and exact his revenge for 3,000 years. Quite a story. Without his magic I would still be dead, Dartin replied gratefully. Then bless this Andamar, Kerr said, for returning you to us. There was one more thing, Dartin said. I met our nemesis face to face. How was that possible? He is powerful, that much I could tell. He had no fear of Odin or of the Lich King that I could see. He is Dark Elfar. What did he look like? He was dressed in fine mail, neither shiny nor dull, that flowed with his every movement. Adamant, Kerr said. Their kind wears it down here. In the sunlight it quickly rusts, but down here it is as strong as mithril. He was tall and lean, with a proud face and a hawkish nose. His eyes were sky blue. Then he is no Dark Elfar, Kerr said. Their eyes are built for the darkness. I heard a story once, Tarek said knowingly, that those dark elves who are born beneath the sun are born with eyes like us. There are legends, Dao mused reverently, that all Laos Ulfar were once of one race, separated during a great war between the gods. Those that sought refuge beneath Tempest became the Dark Elfar, and as time passed, they were almost forgotten. Hogwash, Kerr said, grumbling. Their hearts are as black as their goddess. There are good and evil in all peoples, Karina said. It's up to us to decide which side we're on. And what did he say to you? Carmen asked. He said that we shall meet again. Kerr tested the edge of his axe and found its sharpness satisfactory. His look was both cold and grim. I'll be ready. They spoke of the Dark Elven commander for some time, each of them asking this or that about him until they all felt that they knew the man as well as Dartin did. They could only imagine what he wanted to do with the Duaredheim staff when he got it. Conquer the world would be the least of it, they were sure. They planned and took an inventory of their supplies. Kerr salvaged what he could of his gear and discarded the rest. He would be barefoot and pantsless from here on out. Leander offered Dartin his cloak and Carmen her spare sword. Dividing up their gear as best that they could, they tried to supply their companions. Tarek went to work on the pig's hide, scraping off the fat, smoking it, and using the swine's brain to tan it. I've got enough hide here to make moccasins for your feet, he said, and put some clothes on you two. If Kayla can break out some of those pots of his, we can boil this fat down. It will help to keep us from starving. We cannot live on lean meat alone. Kerr rummaged through his pack and soon produced 2 cooking pots. Or Kalor Kalor rummaged through his pack and soon produced 2 cooking pots. In the span of a few hours, they produced a good quantity of lard. "Thank the gods for this pig," Karina said. "It was the most delicious thing that I have ever eaten." And there was not a soul among them who did not wholly agree. "Let's rest now," Carmen said. "We'll stay here and sleep for as long as we can. Guard shifts, 2 by 2 buddy teams." They slept and they ate until they felt their vigor renewed. The tunnels around them remained quiet, and neither the dead nor the living disturbed them. They stayed in that place for 3 days and nights. The pigs returned to feed on the 3rd day, but fled before any more of them could be taken. Tarek used all his skill at leathercraft to fashion moccasins for Kerr and Dartin. Using the entire hide, he crafted pants for the dwarf and a kilt for the priest. If only he could have killed another pig, he could have repaired all their clothes. But the animals were wary and fled from the slightest sound or scent. Kalor and Dao meditated. With the help of Kalor's Book of Shadows and Modrul's book, they filled their minds with formula of power, phantasms and bolts of light that struck like arrows, and Dao's spells of levitation, tornado wind, and gentle falling. With diligent study, they were able to add to their repertoire. Modrul had spells to hold and bar a doorway, conceal his presence in a cloud-like mist, and dispel magical effects and enchantments. Dao also learned how to conjure the power of lightning, the might of the heavens themselves. Kalor was even able to become invisible for a time, one of the most versatile spells of the illusionist. Their work was tiring, but when they were through, their confidence in their pride as wizards had grown. Together, they were able to accomplish far more than either of them could have managed alone. Once they had done all that they could to heal and to rest, it was time to travel on. "Try the Scepter's gem once more," Carmen said. "Let us see if we're still on course." "And to Dorinumen," Kalor chanted. "Atha Mirak Naman." Bursting to life, the gem pulled him southward still, drawing him forcefully toward the tunnel leading out of the cave. "Let us move forward in the light for a while," Carmen suggested. "Kalor, you and Kerr have the lead. Dao, your dagger, if you please." Producing his knife, he held its brilliant light aloft as they began their quest anew. The passage was narrow and winding. Often they would have to proceed in single file, or squeeze between mountains of rock encroaching on the tunnel. Many times the tunnel was partially filled with water, and several times they were forced to explore ahead underwater. During these times, Carmen's helm proved invaluable. Remaining submerged indefinitely, she found the way through again and again. One by one they would follow her, led forward by the rainbow light of Kalor's diamond, or that of Dao's dagger. They traveled on in this manner for many hours, until the passageway finally began to rise and to widen. As they entered into a series of interlocking caves, their pace quickened. "Something has passed through here recently," Tarek observed. "Perhaps the pigs know how to swim," Karina guessed. "I saw no sign of where they ran off to." "They may have a hidden den," Kerr said. "It's possible, but stay on your guard," Tarek said worriedly. "I sense that something is wrong." "As do I," Carmen said. "There is something ahead of us, something waiting." She signaled to them all to spread out, and they crept forward slowly till they came to the beginning of an even larger cavern. In size, it was at least 200 feet in width and twice as long, with a jagged ceiling of some 50 feet in height. A great rift valley crossed through the center of the cave, and water could be heard rushing through it. The river appeared from the west wall and dove into the east. An arched bridge, well-fashioned of stone, crossed it. When their light entered the room, the entire cavern sparkled. The very walls and floor were permeated with some shining silver metal. "Mithril!" Kerr gasped in wonder. "Never before have I seen so much in one place." "No doubt it is guarded," Carmen said. "Kalor, check out the bridge." To pay a toll. Kalor approached the structure. Bones littered the ground here and there, some of fish and others larger. Drawing his sword, he felt better and padded closer. The stonework was old, but well wrought and mortared, and he could see no obvious traps. The road across the bridge looked damp, as if something had recently crossed it, but it could just as well have been river spray. Kneeling down, he picked up some loose dirt at the base of the bridge and traced a faint outline that he saw there. It was clearly a footprint, almost human, but huge and clawed. Behind him, his companions were fanning out, looking everywhere for signs of danger. Carmen searched with her enhanced vision, and soon saw the same damp footprints that Kalor had discovered. Kerr gripped Korinkoth tightly and readied his shield. His gut feeling was one of dread. "Danger is near, Kalor," Kerr warned. "Fall back, laddie." Carmen could feel the presence of evil. It was different from that which she had felt at the catacombs. A savage presence lurked before them, bestial and hungry. "It hides," she said. "Form a wedge. Carefully now, to the bridge." They reached the ledge top, overlooking the river some 3 feet below its banks. There were fading watermarks along the riverbank as well. "Whatever it was," D'Artin said, "it must have come from the river and then went back in. Maybe it has come and gone." "Maybe," Tarek agreed. "Or it may have a lair of some kind nearby." "The bridge is the only way across," Carmen said resolutely. "The river is swift." "Send Kalor across to check it out," Tarek advised. "He should be able to find any traps that the bridge might hold." "I'll go with him," said Kerr. But before they could complete their search, there came a frightful scratching sound from beneath the archway. When they looked up, a ghastly figure had clambered over the bulwark, stooping low at the top of it. Black it was, with long drooping arms and a scabrous, dripping appearance that brought forth such thoughts of revulsion that they all had to stifle the urge to retch. Its toes and fingers were both webbed and clawed, and its eyes were glassy, dull orbs with no discernible pupils. Long, gangly body hair clung to it like seaweed. Never before had they seen such a beast. Never before had they felt such remorseless disgust. If their fear had allowed it, they would have immediately known that such an 8-foot tall creature could, or what such an 8-foot tall creature could possibly be. A beast that would call a lonely bridge its home. A monster that would demand payment before allowing any to cross. And lo, the creature did speak in a bubbling, raspy croak that invoked images of the darkest, deepest depths of lonely passageways where no mortals dared to tread. "I am the Troll King. I smell your blood," it hissed, its gill flaps fluttering with anticipation. Tasty, delicious blood. Rising to its full height, it pointed at them. "None shall pass without first paying a troll's toll." The troll's words ended with an awkward pause, its hands opening and closing in anticipation. The heroes before it were spellbound by its hideous form. Tara considered the troll's words and answered it. "It would seem foolish," he said, "for one as great as you to challenge the might of many." "Yes, ugly elf," it hissed, "but a troll's bridge is treacherous, and you are but small. Our blades are keen and our bodies strong," he said resolutely. "We fear you not." "No blood need we shed," it replied, "as long as you pay a troll's toll." "What is your price? Do you want gold or jewels?" "I want," it said with saliva dripping from its jagged toothed maw, "the human girl." "I'm afraid," Tarek said, "that she is not a possible trade." "Then we shall have to take her." Their focus was on the bridge, but instead of an attack from its crest, the battle emerged from the river. Bursting over the banks, the troll's companions rushed at them from the water's edge, their talons reaching out to engulf D'Artin at their left flank and Karina on the right. Before their grasping arms could meet them, their arms were met by lyosulfur barbs. "Send mine arrows," Tao chanted, "a swordsman's curse. To the heart of my foes my flying blades doth rush." Firing swiftly, he struck both of the emerging trolls before they could take 2 steps out of the water. To his horror, His arrows barely slowed them. For since time's beginning, the trolls possessed powerful bodies that could heal any wound save those made with fire. Barely affected, the trolls attacked. Kerr held back, certain that the monster on the bridge would charge them at any second. When he saw Dao's arrows strike without effect, he was dismayed, but it was at that moment that he knew what the creatures were. Excuse me. Trolls, he shouted. All of their unburned wounds will quickly heal. We must use fire. Why the trolls had chosen an under-earth river to be their home was now made clear. Any burning wound that they received could be quickly quenched in its waters. Karina met the rightmost troll without hesitation. Fear honed her reaction to a razor's edge, and it was almost a relief when the attack finally began. Her taut muscles sped her out of harm's way. Dodging to the beast's right, her black leather-clad form seemed a shiny and insubstantial thing next to the troll. It was fast, disturbingly so for so large a being, but she was faster still. Its blows fell upon naught but air, and her dance was fast raining a multitude of cuts upon its hide. Wielding the sword of the guardian of the north wind, her blows punished it, and its rage grew. It turned about quickly to drag her in and tear her limb from limb, but she was always a step ahead. And only the troll's body knew pain. She cut and she hewed. But the monster's body was fast repairing itself, and it would never slow unless it was crippled. Without fire, she knew that it was a battle that she could not win alone. Fighting on, she tried to conserve her strength, hoping to keep the beast occupied long enough for her friends to find a way to defeat them. In the meantime, fatigue and the troll were her greatest enemies. On the left flank, Dartin faced the leftmost troll near the river's edge. Carmen was close behind him with her Vanir bow in her hands. He was neither as quick as Corina, nor as enduring as Kerr, but he was more than proficient in the use of a sword. The troll was a mighty foe, over 3 feet taller than he was, but something within him knew how to face and to kill such a terrible opponent. When the troll's first paw descended to crush him, he stepped back and called upon Elhaz, the rune of protection. Instantly his body was protected, as if he wore a suit of the finest mail. The troll's claws struck him, but his flesh was like tempered steel, and he was barely harmed. Never before had the troll encountered a puny human that could resist its deadly power. It had struck its flesh with all its vast strength, and encountered unfaltering resistance. Its doubt was a fleeting thing, for it was not the first time the monster had encountered magic. It was only a matter of time before the protective spell would likely wear off, and then it would feast. It attacked more fiercely than ever, and Dartin had to work hard to fend it off. Tarek stood to his right, and he called his sword to flame. The trolls shrank away from his blade, and this brought Kinaz, the rune of the burning torch, to his mind. Wielding his sword in his right, he invoked the rune with his left, and Kinaz manifested. His sword, normal in every way, burst into flame and remained burning like a torch. Backpedaling, the troll swatted at him in an attempt to disarm him. It hissed and spat. "Your fire will not save you, manling. We will still eat your flesh." "Not if I have anything to say about it," Leander shouted. Side by side with his comrade, they assailed the monster. Carmen stood behind them, sending arrows of light wherever they were most needed. They were fire enough, it seemed, because the wounds that her bow made did not instantly heal. Tarek and Kerr climbed the bridge toward the Troll King, while Kalor prepared his magic at the foot of it. Fearing for his wife, Dao sent the last of his arrows into the monster before her. His shots were unerring, and the troll's body was pierced in many places. In contempt, the troll plucked each of them from his flesh, and the wounds soon closed. His arrows spent, he slung his bow and began to raise his power. Karina was too wrapped up in her deadly dance to spare any of her attention. Fighting with precision, She struggled to find a way to bring the beast down. Remembering a technique of pattern forming that she had learned from a master swordsman over a century before, she began a new strategy. A skilled fighter could control the flow of battle in many ways, and she absolutely had to remain in control. Moving clockwise around her opponent, she lashed out high and low in a repeating fashion. Soon the troll grew to expect it, and he easily parried her blades aside. The trick of the tactic was to change the pattern so suddenly that one's enemy would continue to follow the habitual pattern, even after her attack sequence had changed. With a master's skill, she pivoted in a surprise maneuver, reversing her flow and bringing her sword's blade down with all her strength onto the exposed thigh of her enemy. When he attempted his next step, he toppled, for he had no right leg to stand on. Karina continued her onslaught, working all about the fallen troll. She cut it in dozens of places. It roared and lashed at her, and her right calf was badly hurt. Undaunted, she kept moving and slashing. But its restorative powers were great, and without fire, she could not stop it. Its severed leg was somehow inching its way toward its body in an attempt to rejoin with its host. Their bodies could regrow any limb, and if the leg didn't reattach itself soon, the troll's body would form a new one. More terrible still, the severed leg would not die in the absence of its host body, but would instead grow into another troll, the exact duplicate of its former self. Such was the nature of the creatures they faced, regenerative monsters that would never tire and never stop until their prey was consumed or they themselves were slain. Unfortunately, these powers were not the only ones the ancient creatures possessed. Since their creation, every species of troll held a certain dominion over the elements from which they were born. It was a limited ability, but in the scale of mortal things it was very great indeed. These trolls had been formed from the muck and mire of the first swamps of Tempest, and all the beasts of the bog would obey them, as well as spirits of the water element. It was this last talent that the Troll King called upon. Guarding the bridge, the mighty troll called upon the swiftly flowing river to aid in its struggles. Its summons was soon answered by a being of water and born of water. It was a water spirit, as old as the world's beginning. In substance it was water itself. Its existence was living magic, self-aware and mutable in form. Able to form itself into any shape, it rose like an ocean wave from the river's froth. With eyes like waterfalls, it sprouted arms like whirlpools, and splashed with rage at its summoning. "Why have you awakened me?" it steamed, for to call up such elemental spirits was perilous and unpredictable. The nature of water was to travel with the flow of the world, and to interrupt that flow went against nature itself. Nevertheless, the trolls were abominations, and since their beginning, cared little for the flow of nature, except when it suited them or when they were hungry. The Troll King reached out to the water spirit with his power, grappled with it, and won. "Turn your rage against my enemies," he commanded, "for they are the reason that I summoned you." Rising ever higher, it crested beside the bridge, standing like a living waterfall. Its body fed by the river. Its flowing eyes were filled with the anger of the tempest. Its rage at being forced to travel against the flow was limitless. It was a hatred that the Troll King turned against his mortal foes. The crushing wave that struck them was unlike anything that Tarek and Kerr would have before imagined. It was like the surging waves of the southern coasts, only more focused and devastating. Hurled backward by it, they tumbled and crashed all the way to the base of the bridge. When they rose to their feet, the water spirit followed. Towering above them, it raised its watery arms up again to smash them. Kerr was the first to recover. "Tarek, look out!" he screamed, but the ranger was already on the move, rolling backward to avoid the killing stroke. Kerr leaped over the left wall, avoiding the first wave, but he could not escape the second. He was hammered into the stone rail of the bridge. The wind was blasted from his lungs and his short sword torn from his hand. Gripping Korenkoth desperately, he gasped for breath. Despite the nature of his opponent, he fully intended to fight. Cursing the conjured beast with every painful gasp, he doggedly waded into the tumult, his axe hewed at it, for surely such a thing would have some kind of heart. Unknowing, he brought battle to the creature, his blade, twice forged and with magic inlaid. It gurgled in pain, for such was its nature that only magical the elements could harm it. Indeed, Corin Koth was something of both, forged of the earth elements, formed with fire, and laced with dwarven magic. These qualities, combined with an unrelenting dwarf, hurt the water spirit gravely, but the troll's control was strong, and instead of flight, the water being was forced to fight on. Fist after watery fist slammed into Kerr, until he was blasted back away from its body. Rolling onto his knees, he emptied his lungs and tried to catch his breath. The water spirit turned his attention toward its then closest foe, a tiny, cowering little gnome. Tarek hit the bridge at a run. Knowing well that the water spirit had been summoned by the Troll King, he took advantage of Kerr's sacrifice and faced the troll alone. With a mighty battle cry, he rushed in. "For Carmen," he said, without knowing the reason why, for the heat of battle was in his veins. His heart filled with the fires of war, and his sword seemed to gain something from his valiant conviction. Its flames burned hotter and more ferociously than ever, for it had been forged for the sole purpose of slaying creatures such as these. Somehow, he was unaffected by its flame. Perhaps his own spirit was also akin to the element of fire, or perhaps the sword had been his alone since the time of its crafting, and with its blazing fire he did strike. The troll engaged him in his duel to the death. Its claws bit his flesh, drawing blood wherever they struck him, but his own blows were deadlier still, and the cuts of his sword did not immediately heal. He thrust through the belly, and the Troll King screamed. Its guttural cry echoed with the rot of the bog, reeking of decay. The Troll King had not survived for centuries, using its powers alone. Cunning by nature, it had faced warriors wielding fire before. All of them had fallen beneath its mighty arms and disappeared between his crushing jaws. Certainly this encounter would be no different. Lunging suddenly, it scooped up its prey between its crushing arms, and the elf was unable to avoid them. Pulling Tarek in, it opened its jaws wide to engulf his head, and in that attempt it made one fatal error. Even as his claws encircled the elf's shoulders and pulled him in, his foe's enchanted blade was driven up to its hilt into his heart. Roaring, it wrestled to free itself of the troublesome pest, for it could feel its life slipping away fast. He was struck, his flesh torn, but Tarek was in all respects a ranger born, and his tight grip upon his sword would not relent. Even he was wrenched about and hurt, so too was the troll killing himself. Tarek pulled and twisted, working his blade throughout its vitals. Never had the Troll King experienced such pain, an agony from which it felt its life slipping away. Fighting with all its remaining strength, he tried to devour his enemy's head, but it only drove the blade in further. Sinking to his knees, he could not hold on. The elf would have tasted so good, but it was only a minute or two before the burning pain was gone, and so too its body. Standing over the Troll King's burning corpse, Tarek again cried out, but it was not from the bitter pain of his wounds, nor from his longing to return to his forest home. Nay, he cried out only for one thing: victory. One small success, but three terrors remained. Darton and Leander had fought together side by side countless times, and because of this, they had developed deep understanding of the other's techniques. With careful diligence, they rushed in and retreated, always keeping the troll off balance. Both of them were injured, but Darton's spell had protected him well, and none of the troll's blows had seriously harmed him. Darton's burning brand had scarred the troll, but spray from the water spirit dampened it, and its fire sputtered. Behind them, Carmen worked her bow furiously, and the trolls bled from countless wounds that would not heal. Soon the troll would fall, and then they would need Tarek's enchanted blade to finish it. Its king had fallen, and though it had retaken control of the elemental, it knew that their victory was no longer certain. He needed time to heal, and so he formed a plan of escape. The battle had in no way sated its hunger, and so it chose to capture one of its enemies and bring it down to its underwater lair. The human woman would be the easiest to kill and the most likely be the sweetest. Elves tended to have a displeasing aftertaste, and so its quarry chosen. He chose Carmen to capture and feed upon. With a tremendous effort, it threw the elves before it aside, and closed the gap with the warrior woman in a rush. Tossing her blow aside, she reached for her sword. The troll swept her up in a tremendous hug, turned swiftly, and leaped into the river with her. Its wisdom told him that if he held her under long enough, then she would drown. Once dead, she would be far easier to eat. His mind was filled with scrumptious and desirous thoughts. All right, that's where we'll end today's episode. Halfway down, page 375. Next time, episode 30, we'll find out if Carmen survives capture at the hands of the troll. Remember, as always, read part 2 of the Duaredheim Staff Saga, The Drums of Doom, and all of the companion novels. Thank you and have a great night.